You have not given them the rights to govern themselves for thousands of years. What about their capacities and capabilities? And therefore, he said that there is a moral question of self-representation of the Dalits. Not only moral question of self-representation of the Dalits, he talked about self-representation of the minorities, where he tried to establish the religious rights of the minorities in the Constitution Assembly, and of course the rights for the women in the Indian Constitution with the Hindu Code Bill, where he tried to argue that for women specifically, that Hindu marriage will not be a sacrament. It should be a contract, and therefore the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 changed the Hindu Marriage Act as a contract rather than a sacrament. The second was, of course, he allowed or he made law for the civil marriages in which intercaste marriages and interreligious marriages were to be accepted. The third was right to property. Right to property for women in the property of husband, and also right to property to daughter in the property of father. Anti-Dowry Act was another law which he passed, and last but not the least, the consent of wife in adoption. That earlier actually in India, in adoption of the kid, the consent of wife was not required, but after the Hindu Code Bill, the consent of wife was also taken into consideration. Now, these are few, I'm just giving you examples that he tried to establish for the process of nation building, in which erstwhile excluded communities were supposed to be given self-representation. Last point in the nation building process, you know, he was trying to argue that yes, four very important steps which have to be adhered if we really want to keep our unity and integrity alive. And these are four, and I'll stop. The self-introspection by the Indians. The self-introspection by the Indians that yes, whether the Jaichans are within the Indian society. You know, I'm using a metaphor. Jaichan was, you know, a person who had invited Muhammad Ghori to invade India, and, you know, after that, you know the story. But Ambedkar argued that we have to. It is not that India has lost its freedom once. It can lose. It can lose another time, and therefore we have to self-introspect if you really want to keep our unity and integrity alive. The second aspect, Brother Ambedkar said that adherence to the constitutional means. Ambedkar said that if you really want to maintain your democracy, you should maintain, and I quote, if we wish to maintain democracy, not merely in form, but also in fact, we must adhere to the constitutional method for achieving our social and economic objectives. The third is that denunciation of hero worship. And Ambedkar was very categorical. Ambedkar argued that nothing is wrong in being grateful to great men who have really rendered lifelong services to the country, but there is a limit. There's a limit of gratefulness, as has well been argued by Irish patriot Daniel O'Connell, and I quote, "No man can be grateful at the cost of his honor. No woman can be grateful at the cost of his chastity, and no nation can be grateful at the cost of its liberty. The caution is far more necessary in the case of India, because in India, bhakti, reverence, is also a path of devotion which is very much there, and therefore hero worship can be translated into politics also. So bhakti in religion is all right. It can be road to salvation, but bhakti in politics is a sure road to degradation and eventual dictatorship. And therefore he denounced hero worship. last but not least, Ambedkar was also trying to argue that we should not remain to the level of political democracy only. We have to transcend and translate political democracy into social and economic democracy also, if we really want to strengthen our country and lead a process of nation building. Thank you.